Imagine a powerful lawyer, surrounded by all the luxury that success can buy, but who, in a split second, humiliates a boy at the door of his office. What he didn't know was that that boy kept a secret that could turn his world upside down. It makes you wonder, how can someone so focused on themselves be brought down by a simple encounter? The truth is, life has its ways of teaching unexpected lessons, and when that lawyer gets a call from an old friend, a dramatic twist begins to unfold. What would you do if you were forced to face past mistakes head-on? Is redemption possible for everyone? Stay with me, because this story will challenge everything you believe about overcoming, humility, and altruism. If you are ready to embark on this journey of emotions and discoveries, subscribe to the channel now and turn on notifications. Let's unravel this story together. It was a morning like any other in New York. The sun rose lazily between the skyscrapers, but the city was already in full swing, and Jasper Whittaker, as always, was racing against time. Renowned lawyer, with an iron reputation, he crossed the streets of the city that never sleeps with long strides, his mind focused only on the next big professional challenge. The crowded streets were seen by Jasper as an obstacle, a delay in his relentless pursuit of success. Each person passing by seemed like a minor hindrance, something to be ignored in his rush. With his Italian leather briefcase under his arm and an impeccably tailored suit, Jasper barely noticed the details around him. The sound of horns, the voices, the constant movement of a city in a rush. It all seemed distant, almost like a backdrop to his own journey. There, at that moment, he had no time for breaks, much less for distractions, as the weight of his responsibilities was always pushing him forward, as if the world depended on his decisions. Who has never felt this way? Too focused to notice what is around them. But life has its ways of remembering what really matters. At every step, Jasper confirmed his commitment to what he believed would be his greatest achievement, a pivotal meeting that could change the course of his career. Everything was at stake, and he knew it. It was this kind of pressure that fueled his ambition. However, the reality is that, behind the facade of success, there was something greater that he had not yet faced, the need for humility. But who would have time to think about that, when the world is always demanding more? This type of dilemma can easily be associated with real life, where external pressure makes us forget about internal issues. As Jasper crossed yet another avenue, a silent doubt began to arise in the back of his mind. Was all this really necessary? This personal drama, hidden in his constant rush, was perhaps the spark for a turnaround. We all, at some point, wonder if what we pursue so fervently is really worth the sacrifice, right? But at that moment, he chased away any reflective thoughts and continued. After all, society makes us believe that only success defines us. The fact is that the incessant search for power and recognition creates a barrier between us and what really matters. Jasper, for example, didn't notice the people around him, just as we often miss moments that could transform our lives. Life has a funny way of showing us that, in fact, we are all more connected than we realize. And it is precisely in these small moments that she plays an unexpected card. On his way to his office, something seemed different that morning, but he couldn't explain what. Maybe it was the air, which was a little fresher, or the silence, which, at certain moments, seemed longer than usual. That feeling was there, hovering like a premonition. The day that had started out so ordinary was about to bring a big change. In our own lives, too, we often don't realize the moment when everything will change. Jasper continued, the ticking of his wristwatch marking the rhythm of the city and his heart. Every minute wasted was an opportunity that could slip away, and in his mind, that was unacceptable. But the truth is that, in the midst of this unbridled search, he began to lose himself. How many times do we get bogged down in work, in the demands of everyday life, and leave aside what really matters? The drama in real life is as intense as that in a movie. As he approached the office, he adjusted his collar, trying to convey an image of complete control. However, behind that expensive suit and designer briefcase, there was a man who, like the rest of us, was still trying to understand what success really was. Sometimes, true overcoming is not in reaching the top of your career, but in realizing what we left behind along the way. And as Jasper's story will show, the answers we seek often come at the most unexpected times. And it was exactly at that moment that life decided to change the game for him. Something as simple as a chance encounter, a small but meaningful mistake, was about to happen. And life, relentless in its way of teaching, would teach Jasper that true power does not lie in professional success, but in the humility of recognizing our flaws and the altruism of seeking something beyond ourselves. As he turned the corner, in his usual rush, Jasper almost tripped over something unexpected. A boy. He was no more than 10 years old, standing in the middle of the sidewalk, holding a box of sweets. "Hey, sir, do you want to buy some candy?" "It's to help my school," the boy asked with a shaky voice. Clearly intimidated by Jasper's figure, annoyed by the delay and the hassle, Jasper pushed him harder than he intended, causing the candy box to fall and scatter across the floor. The boy hurriedly bent down, his hands shaking, trying to collect the scattered sweets. Jasper, however, didn't give it a second look. He continued walking, without even looking back, completely ignoring the expression of sadness and disappointment on the boy's face. For him, that meeting was just another distraction that prevented him from reaching the top, another obstacle that needed to be removed. Time was short, and he couldn't waste another second on problems that weren't his. What he didn't yet know is that sometimes obstacles are placed in our path to make us stop and reflect. Life, just like this seemingly insignificant encounter, has its subtle ways of teaching. How many times do we go through moments like this, ignoring an opportunity to show compassion, to act with humility? The truth is that, in our rush to achieve our goals, we often leave aside what really matters: empathy. That little boy represented more than Jasper could imagine. He was the mirror of something that was missing in the lawyer's life: the ability to look beyond himself. The drama of this brief encounter, which seemed banal at the time, would soon prove to be a turning point. Just like in our lives, where small encounters can bring big twists. Have you ever stopped to think about how many opportunities for overcoming you may have missed because you were so focused on your own problems? Jasper didn't know it yet, but that boy carried a connection he couldn't ignore forever. Something bigger was at stake, something that would change the course of his life. As the boy struggled to collect his candy, a lone tear ran down his face. He didn't say anything. He didn't complain. He just lowered his head and continued his task, with a dignity that few children his age would have in the face of such humiliation. What was going through his head? Perhaps a mixture of sadness and resignation, the certainty that the world is often indifferent to those who need it most. In a sense, we have all been that boy at some point in our lives, facing the coldness of the world with a broken heart. But at that moment, Jasper didn't understand. He was too far away in his mind, focused on his meeting, on his life. Humility was not something he practiced often. However, life has a funny way of putting us back on the path, of making us see what we tried to avoid. Altruism is a rare virtue, and when we ignore life's calls to practice it, we end up missing the chance to grow as human beings. The boy, still there, collecting his sweets from the floor, didn't expect anything from Jasper. I had already accepted that the world is often not kind. How many times have you been in situations like this, where all you needed was a simple act of kindness, but it never came? The power of a small act of selflessness can be immense, but it's easy to ignore when we're caught up in our own worries. For Jasper, this was just any boy. But for the boy, that moment would be unforgettable. With the wind blowing lightly, the boy finally stood up, holding his now half-empty box. His eyes, green and large, still showed a hint of hope, even in the face of the contempt he had just faced. This resilience, this ability to overcome adversity, was something that Jasper needed to learn. But he was far from realizing this. He continued on his way, accelerating, without knowing that that boy would return to change his life. And so, with a resigned sigh, the boy turned and began walking in the opposite direction. At that moment, destiny was just beginning to chart a new course for both of them. What seemed like a simple meeting would, in fact, be the beginning of a journey of redemption and transformation. After all, life surprises us precisely when we think everything is under control. And this seemingly banal meeting would plant the seed of a turnaround that no one could have predicted. Back at Whitaker Associates' plush office, Jasper barely had time to settle into his leather chair when his secretary, Emily, walked in with a stack of documents. "Your meeting with the Apex Corp executive starts in 10 minutes, she informed, with her usual professional tone. For Jasper, it was another normal day at the top of the corporate world, where every meeting felt like a battle and every signature felt like a victory. He adjusted his tie, picked up his papers, and prepared for another round of negotiations. But then something unexpected happened. Emily hesitated for a second, which caught Jasper's attention. "Oh, there's one more thing," she added, almost reluctantly. "Dominic Reeves called, said it was urgent." The name made Jasper freeze for a moment. Dominic. I hadn't spoken to him in years. A friendship that was once inseparable, full of dreams and promises, was now reduced to distant memories. The weight of guilt hit him like a punch. He knew he had failed Dominic. But why would he be calling now? As thoughts raced through Jasper's mind, he tried to compose himself. "I'll sort it out later," he replied, trying to hide the uneasiness in his voice. The truth is that that call had moved him in an unexpected way. Dominic wasn't just an old college friend. He was a friend, someone who knew things about Jasper that no one else did. And the distance between them was a cruel reminder of how he had removed himself from everything and everyone in the name of his career. That meeting didn't seem that important anymore. The meeting took place, but Jasper's head was elsewhere. Every clause in the contract, every strategic discussion, seemed like a distant echo, drowned out by the memory of Dominic's name. Who has never experienced a moment like this, where something unexpected causes the focus to be completely lost? But at the same time, it was as if that name was pulling Jasper back to a reality he had left behind. Something about that urgent call made it clear that this story was far from simple. When the meeting finally ended, Jasper returned to his office and stood there, staring at his phone for a long moment. Would you call back? Something in his chest said he should. Those memories of college days, of shared dreams, began to weigh on his mind. Sometimes life takes its toll on us for the choices we made, and this was one of those times. With a sigh, he finally picked up the phone and dialed the number Emily had written down. On the other end of the line, a familiar voice answered, but it sounded different, more tired than he remembered. "Dominic," Jasper began, his voice softer than usual. There was a long pause, and for a moment he thought the call had dropped. "Jasper, I didn't know if you were going to come back," Dominic said, with a mix of relief and caution in his voice. The silence between them was filled with everything that had been said and unsaid over the years. "What happened, Dominic? What was so urgent?" asked Jasper, finally opening the door to a conversation that he knew wouldn't be easy. On the other side, Dominic hesitated before responding. "It's about my son, Aiden. He's been missing, Jasper, for 3 years." Those words fell like a weight on Jasper's shoulders. An absolute silence took over the environment, as if the world had stopped for a moment. The drama of that revelation spread throughout the office, and Jasper felt a wave of guilt wash over him. He had become so distant from Dominic, so focused on his own success, that he had no idea what his former friend was going through. As Dominic continued, explaining the grim details of Aiden's disappearance, Jasper felt something inside him begin to shift. The success, the meetings, the negotiations, all of it seemed irrelevant now. 3 years. 3 years of pain and search. And suddenly, Jasper was overcome with the need to help. There was a turnaround underway, and he knew that this phone call wasn't just a cry for help. It was a second chance. He needed to do something, and quickly. "Dominic, I'm sorry," Jasper began, his voice breaking. But Dominic wasn't interested in excuses. "I don't care about that. I need help. The police have given up, Jasper. I'm desperate." The urgency in Dominic's voice echoed in Jasper's mind like a reminder that he could no longer ignore the people he had left behind. That phone call not only reopened a wound from the past, but also brought an opportunity for redemption, to do something selfless for someone who really needed him. And then, a memory hit Jasper like a bolt of lightning. The boy on the street, that boy with shaggy brown hair and green eyes. Could it be? A suspicion took shape in his mind, and for the first time in years, Jasper felt something stronger than professional ambition. the need to right a wrong. Little did he know that he was about to embark on a journey that would change his life forever. While the phone was still vibrating in Jasper's hand, the weight of what Dominic had just revealed began to set in. Aiden, Dominic's son, missing for 3 years. 3 long years without answers. Jasper felt the impact of that information as if it were a direct blow to his chest. Guilt began to creep in like a dark cloud, whispering memories of all the calls he ignored, all the messages that went unanswered. He had chosen to distance himself, preferring to focus on his own journey of success. And now, the price of that choice was at his doorstep. Dominic continued to speak on the other end of the line, his voice choked with a mixture of frustration and despair. I tried to look for you at first, but you were always busy. It seemed like you never had time. Those words echoed in Jasper's mind like a hammer hitting the wall of his consciousness. He knew it was true. He had prioritized his achievements, his goals, and the friendships that once meant so much to him were left behind, neglected. And now, the pain in Dominic's voice was a bitter reminder of how far he had strayed from his own humanity. Jasper, I'm not calling to blame you, Dominic said, trying to dispel the charged silence. I don't know what to do anymore. Nobody helps me, nobody cares. The police have given up. My son is out there, and I'm alone in this. There was a pause, and Jasper felt a twinge of shame mixed with empathy. He wasn't the type of person who usually stood still, but that call left him vulnerable, stripped of his usual self-confidence. The drama of that moment was taking on a proportion he couldn't ignore. I'll help you, Dominic, Jasper finally responded, his voice steady, though his heart still felt heavy with guilt. Tell me what you know. I'll start here. There was a new determination in his voice, a willingness to redeem his past mistakes, not just with Dominic, but with himself. That phone call wasn't just a cry for help from a friend. It was a call for Jasper to begin to see beyond himself, beyond his selfish pursuit of success. It was a chance to overcome, to transform your path. Dominic began to explain the details. Aiden had mysteriously disappeared after an ordinary afternoon at school. No clues, no explanation. Time passed, investigations cooled, and the search for answers became a lonely nightmare for Dominic. Upon hearing the details, Jasper felt a wave of anguish rise. He knew he needed to act. But where to start? The feeling of helplessness was overwhelming. What if the boy I saw this morning? Jasper muttered, suspicion starting to gain strength. Images from that morning began to unfold in Jasper's mind. The boy on the street, selling sweets with green eyes and disheveled hair. The similarities to Dominic's description were disturbing. It couldn't be a coincidence. The idea was absurd, but at the same time, it made perfect sense. Jasper's heart started to race. Was it possible that, in his indifference, he had crossed paths with Aiden himself, Dominic's son, and not even noticed? The revelation made him stand up suddenly, as if it were impossible to remain seated in the face of this new reality. Dominic, I think I saw Aiden today, Jasper said, his voice thick with urgency. Dominic was silent for a few seconds, processing the information. What do you mean? Where? Dominic's voice was now full of hope and despair, a mix of emotions so strong it almost spilled over the phone. It was on the street, right before I got to the office. I didn't know who he was at the time. He was selling sweets alone. And Jasper's voice trailed off. He didn't want to tell how he had treated the boy. The guilt was beginning to become almost unbearable. Dominic didn't need to hear the rest. He knew what Jasper was trying to say. You need to find him, Jasper. You do. The urgency in Dominic's words ignited Jasper's sense of duty. Life offered him a second chance, an opportunity to be more than he always was, focused only on himself. It was time to act altruistically, to put another life before your own. This was the turnaround he needed but never expected. Now his purpose was clear, and he knew time was against them. Jasper hung up the phone, his heart beating fast. He couldn't wait. He put on his coat and hurried out, passing through the office corridors like a hurricane, ignoring the confused questions from his colleagues. The world around him seemed smaller now. His every step brought him closer to a single mission, finding that boy. It was the first time in a long time that he didn't think about his career. his image, or his success. All that mattered was finding Aiden and doing what was right. The past, finally, began to redeem itself. Jasper left the office at a frantic pace. His mind was racing, and the surrounding scenery seemed blurry. The streets of New York, always busy, seemed to tighten around him, as if time were racing against him. He knew he needed to find that boy, and quickly. Every second that passed without taking action seemed to increase the weight of guilt he carried. The image of Aiden, that green-eyed boy selling candy, replayed in his mind like a puzzle he desperately needed to solve. As I ran through the streets I had just crossed in a hurried and indifferent manner, everything now seemed different. Every face, every corner, could be a clue. Adrenaline pulsed through his veins, and Jasper forced himself to remember the exact place where he had seen the boy for the first time. How could he have been so blind, so focused on himself, to not have realized the importance of that moment? Now, Aiden's fate depended on his ability to right his wrongs, and the idea of failing was unbearable. Arriving close to the corner where it all started, Jasper began frantically looking around. His heart was beating fast, and he felt like he was about to run a marathon, even though he wasn't sure what he was looking for. "Aiden, where are you?" he muttered to himself, tension taking over his thoughts. He knew that this meeting was the only chance to make amends for what he had ignored. Sometimes life puts us in situations that seem impossible to resolve, but it is exactly these moments that define who we are. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the streets, and the sense of urgency grew with each passing minute. Jasper wondered if the boy was still around, or if he had already gone away to some unknown place, lost again. Frustration mixed with the fear of not finding him. How could he explain to Dominic that he had seen him but had not been able to find him again? Each unsuccessful step he took increased the pressure, turning his search into a race against time. Finally, after walking several blocks, he saw a familiar figure, sitting on the steps of an old building, with the box of sweets beside him. Was the boy. The relief Jasper felt was almost overwhelming, but he knew he needed to be careful now. He couldn't approach it abruptly. The boy had seen him before, and probably remembered how he had been mercilessly pushed. There was fear in Aiden's eyes when he saw him approaching. Jasper needed to choose the right words, in a way that the boy understood that he was there to help, not to hurt. Jasper took a deep breath and, with hesitant steps, approached. The distance between them was much more than a few meters. It was an emotional barrier he would have to break. "Hi, Aiden," Jasper said, his voice low, trying to sound as gentle as possible. The boy, still suspicious, looked at him with fear, not knowing whether he should run or stay. And there, in that moment, Jasper realized that the only way to earn Aiden's trust was through humility and altruism, two values he had set aside for so long. "I need to apologize to you," Jasper continued, his voice sincere. "I made a mistake earlier. I was rude, and I shouldn't have done that." Those words came out with difficulty, but Jasper knew they were necessary. The expression on Aiden's face started to soften a little, but he still didn't feel safe. Who could blame him? A stranger who had pushed him earlier now appeared apologizing. But Jasper couldn't give up. He needed to make Aiden understand that he wasn't the same selfish man the boy found that morning. The tension in the air began to ease, and Aiden, although still suspicious, didn't get up to flee. It was a small amount of progress, but it was all Jasper needed to keep going. Sometimes the most complicated situations only begin to resolve themselves when we are able to take the first step towards reconciliation. The drama of that moment was palpable, and Jasper knew this was his only chance to right the wrong of his past. Now, he just needed to find a way to gain Aiden's trust completely. As the silence dragged on, Jasper knew the real twist was yet to come. He would need to tell the boy who he really was and why he was there. And with that, Aiden's life was also about to change irrevocably. But for that, he would need courage to continue. Jasper was about to take the next step, and he knew that from there would be no turning back. With his heart racing and his conscience heavy, Jasper crouched down in front of Aiden, trying, for the first time that day, to face the boy as an equal. He knew his words would need to carry more than a simple apology. Aiden needed to feel like he was there to do the right thing. "I wronged you, Aiden," Jasper began, his voice sincere but still filled with palpable tension. "I was in a rush and didn't think straight. I was selfish. I'm sorry about that." Aiden, in turn, remained silent, staring at Jasper. His eyes still showed a mixture of distrust and curiosity. He wasn't used to hearing excuses from adults, especially from someone like Jasper, whose first act had been to be dismissive and push him away without thinking. But little by little, Jasper's posture began to break the ice. The lawyer, who had spent his entire life focused on himself, now saw before him a chance for redemption, something he never imagined he would need so much. The silence between them seemed to last an eternity, until Aiden finally broke the barrier. "Why are you here?" The simple question, but full of meaning, brought to light the real reason Jasper was there. He knew he couldn't lie or hide what had led him to this moment. "I know your father," Jasper said, his voice thick with emotion. Aiden's expression changed instantly. The shock in the boy's eyes was visible. "My father? How did you?" The tension in the air was now mixed with a new energy. Hope, perhaps, or even renewed distrust. Jasper knew this was the decisive moment. "Your father, Dominic Reeves, reached out to me. He's been looking for you for 3 years, Aiden." The words hung in the air as if they had the weight of a divine revelation. Aiden looked down for a moment, taking in what he had just heard. 3 years. The time he spent away, lost and with no one to help him. The weight of those words seemed to affect him deeply. Jasper continued, this time more gentle and careful. "I was a bad friend to your father, just like I was rude to you. But I'm here to fix that. I'm here to help." The sincerity in Jasper's voice was undeniable. He felt that, somehow, by helping Aiden, he would also be reclaiming a part of himself that he had lost over the years, a part that was more human, more connected to other people. "Your father never gave up on you, Aiden. He called me today, desperate, asking for help, and I think I can finally do the right thing." Aiden looked up, still uncertain. If he wanted to find me, what took him so long? The pain and confusion in the boy's voice were clear. The emotional distance between him and his father was as great as the time they spent apart. Jasper understood what that boy was feeling. Abandonment, fear, the feeling that the world had forgotten him. He never stopped looking, but sometimes things don't go the way we expect, Jasper explained, trying to find the right words for a boy who had been through so much. "I know this is a lot for you to process right now," Jasper continued, trying to bring some comfort. "But I promise, this time, you're not alone." Jasper's words began to break through the emotional walls Aiden had put up. For the first time, the boy seemed to want to believe. He wanted it to be true, for everything Jasper was saying to be real, that his father hadn't really given up on him, that there was still a chance to overcome all the pain and drama of his young life. The wind blew gently, as if even the city had stopped to witness this moment of redemption. Jasper, a man who always believed that success lay in his career and results, was now faced with something much bigger, the opportunity to really make a difference in someone's life. He knew this was the beginning of a journey that would change both of their lives forever. Aiden looked at him once more, his green eyes shining in the evening light. "What now?" asked the boy, with a hint of hope in his voice. Jasper took a deep breath, feeling like the weight of responsibility was still on his shoulders, but now with a renewed purpose. "Now we're going to take you back to your father, and I'm going to make sure you never feel alone again." With this promise, the cycle of guilt that Jasper had carried for years began to close. He finally found the path to redemption, and with that, opened the door to a new phase, where altruism and empathy would guide his next steps. When Aiden agreed to show Jasper where he was living, the lawyer's heart sank. Something in his voice, a mix of resignation and tiredness, made it clear that the boy's living conditions would not be easy to see. Aiden walked ahead, guiding Jasper through alleys and streets that the lawyer would never have imagined seeing. It was as if, suddenly, the city he had always rushed through was revealing a dark, neglected face, a side he had never considered existed. Each step revealed a little more of the harsh, invisible reality that Aiden faced every day. Finally, they arrived at an old, abandoned building, with broken windows and walls covered in graffiti. Aiden entered through a side door, with the confidence of someone who knows every corner of that dark place. Jasper hesitated for a moment before following him. The smell of mold and damp was strong, and the dark environment seemed to swallow up any hope of comfort. That place wasn't a house. It wasn't a home. It was a makeshift shelter, a corner where Aiden had found refuge, but which in no way offered the safety that a boy his age should have. Upon seeing the corner where Aiden was living, a small makeshift space with an old mattress on the floor, Jasper felt a tightness in his chest. There were clothes folded next to the mattress, a worn backpack, and a thin blanket that barely managed to disguise the cold. The boy sat on the mattress with a naturalness that made Jasper realize how used Aiden was to that harsh reality. It was painful to imagine that while he was living a life of luxury and success, this boy was surviving in such precarious conditions. "It's not so bad here," Aiden said, trying to sound strong, as if he wanted to minimize the impact of that scene. He had already accepted this as his life, and seeing someone like Jasper there, witnessing his reality, seemed to make him want to hide his shame. Jasper, however, couldn't hide the sadness he felt. He had already seen a lot in his professional life, but nothing prepared him for this. Aiden's words echoed in his mind, so simple and so sad. For the boy, that was normal, and that hurt more than anything. Jasper crouched down next to the mattress, trying to go toe-to-toe with Aiden once again. "Aiden, you can't keep living here," he said, with a firmness mixed with concern. "This place isn't safe, and you deserve so much better than that." Aiden shrugged, as if safety were irrelevant to the life he already knew. "It's better than the street," he replied, with a sad maturity that shouldn't exist in a child. Once again, Jasper felt guilt rising within him. How could he, or any other adult, have allowed something like this to happen? Looking around, Jasper realized that Aiden wasn't just hidden from the world. He was being forgotten by him. That reality was invisible to most people who ran through the streets, so focused on their own lives, as he had been, until the moment he crossed Aiden's path. There, in that space, Jasper realized that his own successful life was a bubble away from the real struggle that many face on a daily basis. And Aiden was a reflection of a society that often turns its face away from the most vulnerable. But now, something inside Jasper was changing. The altruism he had neglected for so long was beginning to show, and he knew he couldn't leave that place without doing something to change Aiden's life. "I'm not going to let you stay here," Jasper said, with renewed determination. "You're coming with me. I have a guest room at my house, and you can stay there." Aiden looked at him, surprised and hesitant, as if he couldn't believe anyone could care so much. "Why are you doing this?" Aiden's question carried years of mistrust, years of him being ignored, left to survive on his own. Jasper knew that for Aiden, trusting someone again would be a big step. "Because I wronged you before," Jasper replied, looking straight into the boy's eyes. "And because sometimes we need help. And now, I'm the one here to help you." It was more than just words. It was the promise that, from that moment on, Aiden would no longer be alone. Jasper held out his hand, and Aiden, still hesitant, finally took it. It was the beginning of a change for both of them. For Aiden, it was the first time in a long time that someone had reached out with the intention of pulling him out of the darkness. For Jasper, it was a chance for redemption, to put into practice something greater than he had ever imagined. As they left the building, night began to fall, and the city lights came on. But inside Jasper, a new light was also lit, one that showed that, with empathy and humility, it was still possible to transform lives, including his own. As the car approached Jasper's office, the tension in the air was palpable. Aiden sat next to Jasper, silent, his eyes fixed on the window, watching the streets quickly pass by. He knew he was about to meet his father, but a mix of emotions swirled inside him. Fear, hope, insecurity. 3 years is a long time to be apart from someone you love. And now, that reunion seemed almost unattainable, as if it could fall apart the moment their eyes met. Jasper, on the other hand, felt the weight of everything that was at stake. He needed to make sure this was more than just a date. It needed to be a real chance to reconnect. When they arrived, Jasper's secretary, Emily, was already waiting for them at the door, informing them that Dominic was inside, anxious. He's inside, Jasper. But he seems very nervous, she whispered. Jasper nodded, understanding what was about to happen. Aiden looked at him, still hesitant, his shaking hands betraying the calm he was trying to appear. It's okay, Aiden, Jasper said, trying to give the boy confidence. You're not alone. Let's do this together. Those words came as a small relief to Aiden, who gave a slight nod. When the door opened, there was Dominic, walking from one side to the other, his face marked by the tiredness and anxiety accumulated over 3 years of endless searching. The moment he saw Aiden, time seemed to freeze, his eyes full of emotion, fixed on his son as if he didn't believe he was really there. Aiden! Dominic's voice came out as a whisper, full of feeling. The silence in the room was almost suffocating, as father and son stared at each other, trying to process the reality of that moment. Aiden took a tentative step forward, and then another. He still wasn't sure how to react, how to feel. Dominic, unable to contain himself, crossed the room in 2 long strides and knelt in front of his son, taking him into his arms in a desperate and emotional hug. Tears began to stream down Dominic's face, and he held Aiden as if he would never let go. My boy, I thought I'd never see you again, Dominic murmured between sobs, his body shaking with relief and happiness. Aiden, initially stiff, slowly began to relax in his father's arms. There was so much he wanted to say, so much he wanted to understand, but in that moment, he simply allowed himself to feel the warmth of Dominic's embrace. I thought you didn't want me anymore, Aiden said softly, his voice choked with the sadness he still carried. Dominic pulled him away slightly to look into his eyes, holding his son's face with both hands. Never, Aiden, never. I looked for you every day, but it seemed like you were gone. I never abandoned you. Dominic's words hit Aiden like a wave. It was hard to believe after so much time, after so much pain and loneliness. But looking into his father's eyes, he began to realize the truth, the love that was always there, even from a distance. It was an emotional turn of events he hadn't expected, but had been looking forward to for so long. At that moment, Aiden began to understand that the pain of his absence was not just his, but also his father, who carried an equally heavy burden. Both were hurt, but together, they began to heal the wounds. Jasper, watching the scene closely, felt a wave of relief and satisfaction. He knew that this was just the beginning of a long journey for both of them. But that first step, the reunion, was crucial. Seeing Dominic and Aiden together, after so long apart, made Jasper realize that sometimes destiny offers us chances for redemption, to correct mistakes and find a new path. He felt that, in some way, he was also being transformed by it all. Dominic, still holding Aiden in his arms, looked at Jasper, his eyes full of gratitude. I don't know how to thank you, Dominic said, his voice still choked with emotion. Jasper just smiled, shaking his head. No need, Dominic. That's what matters. He knew that that simple sentence wasn't enough to explain the whirlwind of feelings that filled him. But at that moment, words were secondary. What mattered was what was happening before their eyes. A family being reunited. As the minutes passed, the hug broke. But the connection between father and son was stronger than ever. Aiden, now calmer, looked at Dominic with new hope in his eyes. What happens now? He asked, his voice still soft but filled with curiosity and a hint of anxiety. Dominic looked at him, running his hand through his son's hair, as if to assure him he was real. Now we rebuild everything, Aiden. Together, I'm going to take you home. That moment of hope and turnaround was what everyone there needed. The past was far from erased, but the future, for the first time in a long time, seemed full of possibilities. And so, father and son began a new phase, where broken bonds would begin to be restored, with Jasper by their side, ensuring that this reunion was the first step in a long and difficult, but rewarding, journey of overcoming. The courtroom was silent, but the tension in the air was almost palpable. Aiden's custody battle had reached its climax, and all eyes were on the judge who would soon decide the boy's future. Jasper and Dominic were sitting side by side, their expressions serious and anxious. Aiden, among them, tried to remain calm, but the nervousness was evident. That cold, Impersonal courtroom was not a place a boy his age should be. But here he was, about to face a decision that would change his life forever. On the other side of the room stood Margaret Hartley, Aiden's grandmother, her face set and determined. She believed that Dominic was not capable of taking care of his grandson, that he had failed Aiden in the past, and that this disqualified him as a father. Her lawyer spoke with a confidence that seemed rehearsed, painting a grim portrait of Dominic, an absent man, unable to protect his own son. He failed when he needed to be there most, said Margaret's lawyer, his words weighing like a sentence. Dominic listened to everything in silence, but Jasper knew how much those words hit him. Sitting next to him, Jasper could feel the growing tension, guilt and sadness that Dominic had carried for so long. It was true that he wasn't there when Aiden disappeared, but that didn't mean he wasn't the right father for him. The legal battle was far from just an argument about laws. It was a question of love, of reconnection, of overcoming past mistakes. When it was Dominic's turn to speak, he stood up with a shaky but determined voice. He didn't need big speeches or flourishes. His sincerity was what mattered most. "I've failed in the past, that's true," Dominic began, his eyes falling on Aiden for a moment. "But I never stopped looking for my son. I never stopped loving him. Not for a second. Aiden is my life, and all I want now is a chance to prove that I can be the father he deserves." Dominic's words hit home. Aiden, who until then had remained silent, looked at his father with new eyes. It was difficult to hear all that arguing about what was best for him, as if it were a simple decision based on who was more right or wrong. He knew his father had failed in the past, but he also knew that Dominic never stopped fighting for him. And in that moment, Aiden realized that his father's love was stronger than any mistake. When the judge asked Aiden for his opinion, the silence in the room was absolute. Everyone was waiting for what the boy had to say. Aiden took a deep breath, feeling the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. "I want to be with my father," he said, his voice firm yet full of emotion. "I know he was wrong, but he never gave up on me, and I need him as much as he needs me." His words echoed throughout the room, leaving everyone silent for a few moments. Margaret, sitting on the other side, lowered her eyes, unable to dispute what her grandson had said. That was the decisive moment. The judge took a long look at everyone in the room before making his final statement. "After hearing testimony and considering Aiden's best interests, I grant full custody to Mr. Dominic Reeves." The relief on Dominic's face was visible, while silent tears rolled down Aiden's face. Jasper, beside them, felt the weight of tension lift. It was the end of a long battle, but also the beginning of a new phase in the lives of everyone there. Margaret, although defeated, looked at Aiden with eyes full of sadness. She wanted the best for her grandson, but knew she couldn't replace the bond between father and son. When the hearing ended, she approached Aiden and Dominic. "I only want what's best for you, Aiden," she said, her voice softer now. Dominic, realizing the love that his grandmother also felt for her son, nodded. "We all want what's best for him. We can do this together." As they left the courthouse, the New York sky seemed brighter than ever. The legal battle was over, but the real journey to rebuild Aiden and Dominic's lives was just beginning. Jasper looked at the two, feeling a deep satisfaction in knowing that he had helped build that bridge of reconciliation. Now, father and son could finally begin to heal their wounds, knowing that the worst was behind them. With the end of the legal battle, a new phase was emerging for Dominic and Aiden. It was no simple task to rebuild everything that had been lost over the years, but for the first time in a long time, there was hope. Life, which until then seemed like an endless sequence of pain and disagreements, now presented a new horizon, full of possibilities. As they walked side by side through the streets of New York, the weight of the court decision began to dissipate, leaving space for a sense of relief and a future that could finally be shared. Aiden, despite the turbulence of the last few days, was beginning to feel safer with his father. There was still a lot to be resolved between them, difficult conversations that needed to happen, but the simple fact of being together was a victory in itself. Dominic's look, which previously only carried guilt, now reflected something new, determination and a desire to do everything differently. He knew the road would be long, but he was willing to walk it alongside his son, and that was all that mattered. Jasper, who had been following the two closely, watched with silent satisfaction. He had also changed. The man who, at the beginning of this journey, was completely focused on his career and his own life, now saw the value of something much greater, the impact he could have on the lives of those around him. Aiden and Dominic weren't just a family being rebuilt. They were proof that, with a little altruism and empathy, anyone can overcome even the biggest obstacles. That night, when they arrived at Dominic's apartment, the atmosphere was different. The space, once so lonely and empty, now felt more welcoming with Aiden's presence. They sat down together, father and son, to eat dinner for the first time in years. Aiden was still a little reserved, but the shy smile that appeared every now and then was enough to warm Dominic's heart. "I never thought we'd be here again," Dominic said, his voice low but full of emotion. Aiden looked at him and, after a brief moment, replied, "Me neither. But I'm glad we are." Those little moments of reconnection were precious. Each day, the bond between them grew stronger as old wounds began to heal. They knew the road ahead would still have challenges, but they were ready to face them together. The trust that Aiden was beginning to place in his father was like a balm for Dominic, who was dedicated to being the best father he could. And for Aiden, after so much lost time, finding safety and love again was something he never thought possible. Jasper, now more of a friend than just a lawyer, continued to be part of that journey. He passed by there frequently, and each visit was an opportunity to further strengthen the bonds that had formed between him and that family. More than an external figure, he had become an important pillar in Dominic and Aiden's lives, someone who helped reunite what fate had separated. Jasper knew that although his role in their lives was changing, his presence was still essential. The future, which previously seemed uncertain and full of darkness, was now illuminated by hope. Dominic was making plans for what was to come, dates with family, a fresh start at work, and most importantly, creating an environment where Aiden could flourish again. Aiden, in turn, began to dream about what he wanted to be, what he could do. After years of uncertainty, he now had the freedom to imagine a future where the possibilities were endless. And so, over time, father and son went on with their lives, stronger than ever. There were no guarantees that everything would be perfect, but what mattered was that, finally, they were together. Their journey of overcoming and reconnecting had shaped them in ways neither of them could have predicted, but in the end, it was clear that they had found something much more valuable than just reunion. They had found a new chance to be happy, to create memories together, and above all, being a family again. Jasper, as he said goodbye that night, looked up at the New York sky, now shining with stars. He knew that, like the stars, Dominic and Aiden's lives now had a shine of their own. The future would still bring challenges, but with each new day, they would find the strength to overcome them. And in the end, that was what really mattered. The hope for a better tomorrow, built together day after day. Now that you have experienced this journey of redemption and reconciliation, what does it awaken in you? How many times have you found yourself chasing success without realizing what you are leaving behind? The story of Jasper, Dominic, and Aiden teaches us that even when faced with the greatest challenges, there is always a chance to overcome, if we are willing to act with humility and selflessness. And you, are you ready to transform your life, to face the mistakes of the past and build a new future? Sometimes all it takes is one decision to change everything. If this story touched you, take the opportunity to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. This way, you will continue to learn from more inspiring stories like this. Let's go together, because the next chapter could be the most important of your life. Visit our channel, listen to stories like these, and subscribe to the channel. Help this community bring more messages like these.